I don't really need a microphone, but since it's here, I'll use it. For those of you who are new to this symposium today, I'm Dr. Sharon Grotto, Grahl Endowed Chair in Arts and Languages here at the University of Dayton and Professor of Music. We're off to a great start. Big news, as I think I mentioned last night, the dance party is sold out. That's well over 400 people are going to be here. I hope you have tickets, because I don't have any more. And, we had one cancellation. Unfortunately, Tony Bolden from the University of somebody tell me. Kansas, right? Is ill and he can't be here. So, and this is especially information for Ricky Vincent, who joined us this morning after flying the red eye from San Francisco. And Sarah in the back. Those two are in the afternoon. You guys have a little more time, so you can relax. The only thing we have to stick to on the schedule is that lunch is 12:20 to 1:20, no matter who's speaking or what's going on. The catering doesn't change its schedule. And we want our food to be hot. And speaking of KU, special thanks here to the Kennedy Union staff and also to catering services. We've had great service here. One representative, our tech guy. Tell me your name again.
My name is Tim Shaw.
Tim, let's give him a round of applause. Because I know the technology here works, unlike what's in Sears Recycle. So, and I want to say a special thank you to my office administrator, who must have heard, no, I was going to say that because she just disappeared. And that's Heidi Haas, who's really doing a lot of work. And to Dan Benke and his crew for fighting the technology in Sears, and also he's doing the sound for the dance party. So let's give him thank you. And thanks to Stan Brooks for a little background music this morning. We'll have it at lunch too, and we'll have it again tomorrow morning. What conferences do you go to play funk music while you're having one? I don't know, I haven't been to one. I'll tell you, the conferences I go to, maybe except for ACDA, are not that exciting. So, again, I'm not going to read to you. You have a program full of misinformation, apparently. You can look in it and read the bios. We're going to get started with the art and funk with Bing Davis, Morris Howard, and Brittany, is it Long?
Yes.
Long, right, I did. And Brittany's name, by the way, is spelled like martini. So every time I look at it, I want to say Brittany. That's what I'm doing. So they're going to each present about the funk mural and art in funk. And then we're going to have the questions and discussion afterwards. So let them do that first, starting with Willis Bing Davis, one of the great heroes of visual art and other arts here in Dayton. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you all very much. For your convenience, there's a brochure that has some information on our studio and gallery, and a one-page about the funk exhibit. I'm a product of the Dayton public school system, and upon graduating as an art education major from DePaul University, I came back to Dayton, Ohio to begin my career as an artist and as an art teacher in 1960. And taught from 60 to 67 at Colonel White High School, and had a chance to be in the midst of this great movement of all these young artists coming up and musicians and working. So I had a good front row seat to see. Upon retiring in 1998 from teaching, my last teaching gig was the last 20 years at Central State University, where I chaired the art department and directed the Paul Robeson Cultural Center. But prior to that, 2 years teaching at Miami University, where I received my master's, 67 to 76 to 78. But then, after leaving Dayton, from teaching high school here, I was recruited back to my undergraduate school at DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana. It was from there that I continued to look and work. But coming back to Dayton in 1960 was just a hotbed of activity. So while I was across town in north of Dayton, I tried to get as many of those talent shows as I could, because it was cheap and you saw great talent at Rolfe and Roosevelt and classic theater and on the playgrounds and on the show wagon. So it was quite an experience to be able to see that. When I retired, I took my studio out of my home on Broadway in West Dayton and moved it into the heart of the revitalization of West Dayton on West 3rd Street. And it was from here that my wife and I bought an old building and converted it into a gallery and studio. But what I had been taught also was that when you're involved in the arts, you do more than just make it, you share it. And so besides being an artist and examining my own work, I found great joy in working with many of the other artists in the community. So for the last few years, besides my own exhibition, I make sure that we exhibit from our summer camp of youth, 10 to 18 years of age, but also, which has been a great joy for me, is working with the many emerging artists at different career levels. Those just beginning, self-taught, those with degrees, but those who are right here in the Miami Valley area. So from 2006, after we put a studio together, we've collaborated with the Victoria Theater Association under the sponsorship of the Dayton Power and Light Company to produce at least one exhibit of local artists every year that we've been in existence. So what we have been doing, and you'll hear a little bit from the Channel 1416 coverage of the funk exhibit here, that we've been heavy in identifying outstanding, achieving individuals from West Dayton. And we called this series that we started in 2006, Dayton Skyscrapers. So what we asked the artists to do is to look inside the Black community and find individuals who have excelled in their craft and in their skill in all disciplines, from law to medicine to entertainment to education, to all disciplines, who have excelled and given back to make this community what it is. And these are not tall buildings, but they stand tall in our mind and heart for what they've achieved. And so we have been doing this for like 12 years. And on one occasion in 2014, we wanted to look at some of the other richness of Dayton. And so it was so natural to say, hey, why don't we look at the funk? And so what we did, we called a group of artists together. And there is, and I went back to the studio, we have about 100 catalogs left, and there's a few here if you want to buy them, we're still paying for them. There's a 50-page full color of the exhibit we did in 2014. And this was extremely special because what it also did, and we do every time we have an exhibit, we always make sure the community knows. Because when they talk about African art, Black art, they'll call my name as if I'm the only one. Because they may see, hear, or remember from the old athletic days of my being involved. But there's many artists around. And this happened to be the year just before we also had Morris return back to Dayton and become a part of this group of artists who are working. So what we wanted to do was to challenge these artists to go deep. When we first started to talk about this, Sugar was still with us. And he would talk many times as he'd come by to visit, or we'd see him walking around the community. But we did have Marshall, who attended the early meetings with the artists, which said, wait, we don't want to just do an exhibit. We want this to be extra special. So what we did, with the meetings that we had together and breaking bread together and just talking, we said, we want to do something about the funk as deep as we can. So we challenged each of the artists to go beyond just capturing the surface image of an entertainer, of a drummer, but to try to deal with the funk itself. Listen to as much funk as you can before you start sketching and coming up with ideas. And the artists were planning every place they went. If you see someone walking with you, if you see them walking, they probably listen to funk anyway. But we asked them to submerge themselves into the music again. And then try to reflect in their art, their painting, their sculpture, their drawing, their photography, some of the same essence of what it took to create funk music. So we wanted the images we knew would be different. They weren't just taking an album and duplicating the album, or taking a photograph. No, we want you to think in a funk way. We want you to create in a funk way. So what we did today is to bring some of those images, and I want to just highlight a couple of them because I saw when they brought the work in, getting ready for the photographing and the cataloging and the hanging of the show. I was impressed. It was quite a challenge when we first did it. Some of the artists said, "Hey man, it's hard, it's deep. I can't come up with something. I want it to be unique and different." But I was very, very impressed with my colleagues when they began to bring the work in, and I could see them making that effort to try to work, to express, to paint, as how these musicians may have done when they walked into the studio, or when they created their work. So I brought that, and then the last 10 minutes, Channel 1416 covered the exhibit, which was extra special. And I must mention that this was the most fully collaborative work we have done at our place also since we opened in 2004, 2005. The Victoria Theater Association, and when we work with them, we call it Visual Voices because it's at the Schuster Performing Arts Center. At least once a year we'll collaborate with them. But the Dayton Public School, the Dayton Ponents, a high school, technical high school, has a radio program. And so through the discussion of what we can do to make this special, we got Joanne Viscott, the instructor in the radio class at the high school, to set up an interviewing schedule of the artists. So we brought the artists to the high school to interact and meet with the students who would come over and talk with us at the gallery. And then they began to set up interviews of these artists to interview them about how they approach creating their work. And so tying in that class made it really special because they were able to put barcodes on the work. So during this 2 months of the exhibit, 3 months, you can plug in and hear these interviews by these students of these artists talking about how they approach creating the work that they saw on the screen. But also working with Marshall was just a treat. As I mentioned yesterday, when I first met Marshall, Rock Jones, the great bassist, it was through his sculpture. He was a great sculptor. He didn't have time for it, but he did it. He had a great eye. Of course, we know he had great hands. But it was just special. We talked earlier with Michael Sampson, because in '88, as you know, he did that symposium and had about 35 funk musicians, including Bootsy Collins coming from Cincinnati at the Afro-American Museum. So we had this a collaboration going with the Schuster, Victoria Theater, Dayton Public School, and WISO. And some people know that WISO, at one point in time, which I think is still going on, has a Friday evening spot just for funk music, both for here and around the world. So this collaboration worked out. But what I'm going to do is just share a couple of images and direct you to reading the information on the back of the pages on your desk on some of the background. This is one by Francine Banks, and a 5th grade teacher and artist called The Funky Bass, a mixed media piece. This is also one of hers too, Playing with Fire. Dwayne Daniels, who I met coming out of Dunbar High School as a bass player and a tackle on the football team, but also was the first recruit when we were rebuilding the art program at Central State. He's now in his 50s and now heading the Department of Art. But he came there as a poet, as a writer, but we didn't know if he was going to major in art or creative writing. And matter of fact, the creative writing teacher and I, we wrestled for him for a couple of years before he made a commitment to the visual art. But Dwayne Daniels, I Can Make You Dance. This is a special piece to me because I ended up buying it. But it was, I thought I could still afford it. It's a painting called Computer Love. Directed towards Roger, happened to be a colored pencil, Prismacolor pencil, that my son, who's a communication major, coming back to art, Derrick Davis. One of the pieces I did called The Magic of Funk Lyrics, which is a mixed media found object piece. Love Roller Coaster, again, found objects, a kinetic piece. Craig DeGroat, retired illustrator from Dayton Daily News, now doing his art full-time. And this painting, Very is Love. Very is Love. There's a couple certainly noteworthy pieces that draw your attention to. In this group of artists, two of them are ordained ministers. This is Dr. Lois Fortson Kirk, who retired a Kennedy Methodist Church minister, who also does art on the side. And this is a piece that she did at a monastery that she was visiting when she first got the idea on Computer Love by Roger. Kevin Harris, St. Clair Community College art instructor, Spitting Fire, Spitting Fire. Another piece to draw your attention to, one of the artists has one of the largest black beauty shops in downtown Dayton. She just recently got remarried, but she also was a friend and classmate in elementary school of Johnny Wilder, and church member. And this is a piece she did because a few years ago, she started getting permission from her customers who came to the beauty shop. Do you mind if I keep your hair? And there's something to that, as we know in the black experience. Certain things, fingernails and hair and other things, we can talk about that later. But she got permission to collect it and wash the people's hair, and then she began doing artwork with the hair, whatever color it happens to be. And so she began to exhibit with us for a couple of exhibits. This is a piece, it's all human hair. And from Johnny Wilder's, I think this one was, it's called Hair Tangle, Hair Tangle. But she did some unusual pieces of art. And now have sort of subsided. I think that I don't know if because of adjusting to the new marriage, but we were really excited about what she was doing with hair. Lillian Herbert, some of you may know Lillian. Lillian Herbert. One of the powerful pieces is by one of our powerful artists, our close friend, Morris. This is James Pate, who you remember in 2010 created the Ken Killing Ken series that just finished traveling the country last month. And it's opening next week at Louisville, Kentucky at Muhammad Ali Boulevard, where we'll be sending him down. But, and Brittany recognized his style, but James really took this project to heart. And this is called The Creation of Pain. And he envisioned musicians in the studio coming up with this creative work. But when I talked about an approach, if you know, and you do, know funk music, it can be audacious, it can be exploding, it can be unique, it can be unexpected. When you look at this work, and it's also highly polyrhythmic. So much is going on in this piece that to enjoy and appreciate, and you can almost hear the sound. But this is called The Creation of Pain by James Pate, which I thought was one of those like the Beautician and some of the others who really took the challenge and tried to come up with some very expressive, innovative artwork. One of the graphic designers, Bill Pettiford, a computer artist, Craig Scrivens did a series of experiences after listening to a long, intense, he said a week of just straight out funk music. Every place you go, just listen to music, and then allowing that music to influence the two-dimensional imagery. Another unusual piece to draw your attention to is a seamstress in town who grew up not too far from Keith Harrison in Jefferson Township. Is a seamstress by trade and a doll maker by heart. And this is her piece on Skin Tight. It's an 11-inch handmade doll. Francis Turner. This is called Heaven by another minister. This is Yvette Walker Dalton. Yvette Walker Dalton, who's the Presbyterian minister and had a church in Louisville before coming back to Dayton, from Dayton, Roosevelt High School graduate, and has been involved, and is highly involved now since retiring from the ministry. But we just found some unusual talent. This is another one of hers too, a love roller coaster. This is Yvette Payne. You've seen most of these. I went back to the studio. There's about 85 catalogs that we're still working for. So we do have some in catalogs at 50 pages, and they should be available. They're $15 a piece if you'd like to get one, and some of the artists may be around to sign. But I wanted to thank all of you for your love of funk. At this time, there's a short piece that the Channel 14, 16 did, I think would give you some form growth. What I didn't mention, the stars lined up when we went through doing this project. The stars lined up. Not only did Marshall and Diamond and some of the others give us information and supported us and encouraged us, but the Ohio players happened to be in between gigs. When they heard what we were doing, and Victoria worked with us, we were able to get them to do a concert at our opening. But more than that, thanks to the collaboration with Victoria, DP&L, and others, we had concert tickets for the community at $10. Fill the place up. Fill the place up. And they came from north, south, east, west, Centerville, Springboro, Westchester. It was just an experience. So we got that. We're going to share that for you. It's about 7 minutes, and then we'll have Brittany and Morris come up.
The ice cream cup, the inkjet printer, and the mood ring were all invented in Dayton. Many also claim funk music has its roots in Dayton, and local artists paid homage to it in this year's annual Visual Voices exhibit.
Each February, the Victoria Theater Association partners with EbonNia Gallery to present Visual Voices at the Schuster Performing Arts Center in downtown Dayton. Visual Voices was launched in 2007 to showcase local African-American artists with works based on the theme of Dayton skyscrapers.
Dayton skyscrapers to us is not tall buildings in our skyline, but African Americans from this community who stand tall in our minds and heart for what they've achieved in their field and given back to the community. So we've been doing a series of Dayton skyscrapers and just wanted to make a variational change. And this year, we decided to take another part of great Dayton, and that is funk. And so we challenged the artists to revisit all the funk music that came out of Dayton in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and create a piece of art that has the same feel and the same funkiness as a piece of music. Selecting Dayton funk music as a theme was an easy choice because that's a gem in our community, and we wanted to celebrate not only the musicians.
That's a word game created by James Payne. That great production, yes, but it's the first funk word
impact on popular music that is still impacting music today. What is funk music? You know it when you hear it, and you know it when you feel it. It came through the black experience, which is rooted in African sensibilities and that urban reality. It's powerful, it's energetic, it's whimsical at times. Nothing's more whimsical than the funky worm, you know, or a jive turkey.
Funk is stinky, smelly, sweaty, gritty music with deep bass and drums. But most of all, it's fun with a K on it. It kind of blows your troubles away because you start, you know, just getting into the moment of that beat. And next thing you know, you're moving, your booty shaking a little bit, and like, what was I worried about? And good funk would do that. I grew up right across the river, train stop away from New York City. So we would go to Madison Square Garden, me and my crew, to see the Ohio Players in heat wave. I remember standing in the rain and a line around the block to see a Slave, a group from Dayton. Lakeside, we would go to see all these bands, and they would just set New York on fire. And when I moved to Dayton, it took me about a year or two to realize, oh my God, I had no idea all these musicians came from Dayton.
In 1959, a band formed in Dayton that would later become the Ohio Players. They had 7 top 40 hits between 1973 and 1976. And even though they were world famous, they continued to live and make music in the Miami Valley.
Then, from the Ohio Players, we have nephews, we have other musicians in town who start forming groups. And then you get groups like Slave, Phaser, Lakeside, and the Wilder Brothers who went on to form Heatwave and Platypus. But you have to give so much props to the Ohio Players staying in this community while they were at the Grammys and performing on Soul Train and going to Europe and Japan and being, you know, world famous, but coming back home to Dayton.
Because many times when some people make it, the first thing they do is leave and go buy a big house on the hill. But these musicians came back in between performances around the world, and you can see them down the street, you see them at the playground, you see them at the mall, you could talk to them, you could touch them. That made it real. And it spurred other young people, if they can do it, we can do it. I want to be like Sugar, I want to be like Diamond. It just grew. So there must be something in the water. There's something about Dayton that we all can tap into and be extremely proud of what it can nurture.
The 2014 edition of Visual Voices, titled Visions of Dayton Funk, kicked off with a concert performance by the Dayton Funk All-Stars and the Ohio Players. This special evening began with a traditional West African libation ceremony and a proclamation by the mayor of Dayton from the Schuster Center stage.
During the 70s and 80s, funk groups from Dayton amassed more than 110 singles appearing on the music charts. That's right. So, now therefore I, Nan Whaley, mayor of the city of Dayton, recognize all those who have contributed to the Dayton funk music legacy and do hereby proclaim February 9th, 2014 as Dayton Funk Day in Dayton, Ohio.
When those house lights went up, we didn't know what to expect in terms of an audience. To have 2,000 plus people come down around Dayton Funk, something that is ours, that we've shared with the world. The show just turned out to be just one of the best we've ever experienced.
It was packed. I didn't expect both balconies in the Schuster to be full for this event. It was diverse. I mean, everybody in the community was there. It was white and Asian and Latino and Black, and it was magical. And it just gives the city a taste of what it would be like if we really took this music and gave it its just due and used it as part of our legacy with the Wright brothers and Paul Lawrence Dunbar, all the historical people that came out here. We added funk to that. Dayton really has something to be proud of. Just like Nashville is famous for country and Chicago's famous for blues, I think a lot of fans would come from all over to visit some of these historic places, or meet some of these musicians, or hear these stories here in Dayton. This history lives in the people's memories, but there's not anything besides, our record collection that we can touch.
Currently, the only physical reminder of Dayton's funk music legacy can be found at the intersection of Salem Avenue and Catalpa Drive. A sound sculpture by local artist Michael Bashaw was installed in 2012 on the site of the former Troutman Sound Labs. The 26-foot-tall sculpture is topped by tone rods that play a few bars of I Can Make You Dance When Moved by the Wind. But plans are in the works to establish a Funk Hall of Fame and museum on Dayton's west side, to celebrate the past as well as educate and inspire future generations. In the meantime, the sounds of Dayton Funk are alive and well on the airwaves each Friday night, when public radio station WYSO takes its listeners behind the groove.
WYSO 91.3 Behind the Groove on a funky Friday. What better place to have a funk show but in Dayton, Ohio, the capital, the international, intergalactic capital of funk music. And we're going to set it off with some funk from Spain, Barabbas, and of course James Brown coming up this hour. Feedback and the love that has come back from the listeners in the community has been tremendous. I've gotten emails from people in Arizona and Indiana and Virginia and New York and say, hey, we found your link to your show, YSO.org, and we listen every Friday night. And you can hear some really great B-sides, and not only the Ohio bands, but some historic funk singles and 45s. Scholars, bands, and people that love music do recognize the Miami Valley as being this really special place where this type of music took hold. It's important that right here in the Miami Valley that there is on our radio airwaves a place for this homegrown music to be recognized. I think it's an awesome opportunity.
As we're transitioning to the next two presenters on the arts about the